Okay, good morning, folks. Hope you're doing well today. And I'm going to explain today's assignment, which is called the Baby Phenotype Genetics Activity. And the basic idea here is that you're going to flip a coin between 2 and 6 times um, for a particular trait to determine which variety of that trait a baby has, and then at the end of the activity, the idea is you draw the baby. And here's how that works. Hopefully you can see this sheet. I'm sure you can. Here are the instructions on page 1. You'll notice this is an 11-page assignment, but most of those pages are explaining what the traits are. Take a look. Here's page 2 says here's face shape. Is it round or is it square? Here's the chin. Is it a prominent chin, which means it sticks out, or is it a less prominent chin? Anyways, so a lot of the pages are explaining what the trait and the trait variations are. Okay, but most of your work happens on page 8. And to make it a little easier, because I obviously couldn't print this on paper and hand it out to you, but to make it a little easier to navigate, what I do is I go over here where there's the thumbnails, page thumbnails option, and I think you can find that also, hopefully, on your iPad somehow. And what I do is I scroll to page 8, and then I can see kind of the workspace here. And then I can scroll back to page 1 if I want to check the instructions, or I can scroll back to page 2 if these are the traits I'm working on. And then if I want to go to page 8, I've got it there also. So that's, as far as workflow is concerned, that might be a little bit easier to deal with. So there's one newish idea that's presented in this activity. And this idea did come up once or twice in some of the work we've done already about genetics, but let's just be clear about it. Something that's going to come up is this idea of a trait being polygenic or polygenic. This is another one of those science words where you can take it apart and kind of understand what it means. And in this case, the two parts are poly and genic, right? Poly means many. Genic means relating to genes. So polygenic refers to a trait that is determined by many genes, okay? By many genes. That's what a polygenic trait is, okay? And so what we've been looking at so far are traits that are determined by one gene, okay? And that has a word too. That word is Mendelian, named after Gregor Mendel, who was the Austrian monk who worked with pea plants, who basically discovered the idea of dominant recessive genes. Mendelian is the inheritance style, right? Inheritance being the passing on of traits or genes from one generation to the next. So Mendelian refers to an inheritance style where one gene equals one trait. Okay, which means like A equals brown eyes. Okay, it turns out in reality that's not how eye color works, right? It turns out eye color is a polygenic trait, which means, let's say in this activity, I think they're going to say there are 3 genes that determine eye color, which let's call them A, B, and C, which means your genotype for eye color could be this, right? You could have dominant alleles for all 3 genes. It could be this, right, where you have your heterozygous for the first gene, homozygous dominant for the next 2 sets of genes. Or it could be something like this, right, where you're homozygous recessive for the first gene and homozygous dominant for the next 2, right? And it could go all the way to at the other end of the spectrum, being homozygous recessive for all 3 genes, okay? So it turns out that human eye color actually is a polygenic trait. There's more than one gene that determines eye color. Turns out human skin tone is also one of those polygenic traits. Skin tone is determined by at least 4 separate genes, okay? And so we're going to look at that a little bit as we do this activity. So let's go back to the activity. And how does this actually work? Okay, so here's my workspace again on page 8. I'm going to go back to page 1 where the instructions are. Okay, oops. And so the instructions say record your names as parents on the attached data sheet. Well, that's on page 8. And that reminds me, so it says here mom's name and dad's name. If you want to do this by yourself, that's fine. You just have to be both mom and dad. If you want to somehow arrange to do it with a classmate, that's totally fine too. Just let me know who's who. Put your names there. The child's name, that's up to you. And the sex, that's something that's determined by a coin flip. Okay, and that's number 2 here. It says determine the sex of the child. Which parent should flip a coin to determine the sex of the child? Well, you can determine that. I've got a coin here. So let's say I flip my coin and I got heads. So it looks like we're having a boy. Okay. So then number 3, give your child a name. Record that name in the data sheet. Fine. Number 4, flip the coins to determine which gene of each pair you contribute to the traits of your child. Each child will have 2 genes for each trait, 1 from each parent, except for those traits that are polygenic, in which case they'll have more than 1 gene from each parent, right? For eye color, you get 3 genes from each parent, and for, or alleles, we should probably say you get 3 alleles from each parent, and for skin tone, you get 4 alleles from each parent. So how does that happen? Let's look at go to page 2 and see. Okay, face shape. It says capital R, or the dominant allele, gives you a round face. Lowercase r, or the recessive allele, gives you a square face. Okay, so what I'm going to do is flip a coin. I'm going to pretend I'm both mom and dad. I'll pretend I'm mom first. I flip a coin and I get heads. So then I go to page 8. Right, and I write in here capital R, because heads means a dominant allele, okay? And then I flip again for dad's gene, and it turns out I got heads again. That's 3 heads in a row. Okay, so that's capital R from dad. So the genotype is going to be capital R, right? That's what we've determined so far. And the phenotype is going to be what? Means the trait style is going to be what? Well, let's go back here. Capital R. So what's that going to be? That is going to be a round head. So I write that in here. Right? Round. Okay. Then you do the same thing for all of these traits. If they're Mendelian, it's real easy. Mendelian, again, means there's 1 gene that determines the trait. So 2 alleles, 1 allele from mom, 1 allele from dad. Let's look at one that's not Mendelian. The first one that comes up here is skin color. Okay, and so let's just go ahead and read through this together. It says, to determine skin color, assume there are 3 gene pairs involved. Okay, there's actually more than that, but that's fine. So flip your coins first to determine the genotype of the A genes. So basically you're saying, if I get a heads and a tails, I have a capital A and a lowercase a. Okay, and then you do the same thing for B. Let's say, let's just go ahead to the data sheet, and let's just say here on page 8, and let's say here we are, skin color. Let's say I ended up with AA, B, C, C, like something like, oops, sorry, that would be, let's say for mom I got a capital A, a lowercase b, and a capital C, and from dad I got a capital A, lowercase b, and a lowercase c, okay. And then I would put here, I'd combine my A's, my B's, and my C's, right? So this is, remember, you get this capital or lowercase in this section by flipping a heads or a tails. And you combine them here, and you combine them in where you group your genes together. So your A's get grouped together, Your B's get grouped together, your C's get grouped together. And then we say, what's the phenotype going to be? Well, how do we determine that? Meaning, what's the skin tone going to be? Well, let's go back to that description, which is on page 2 here, and it says 6 capital letters or 6 dominant alleles is very, very dark brown. Okay, so it turns out all the way down to 0 capital or 0 dominant alleles, white, super unpigmented, right? So let's see, what did we get on page 8? I'll take a look. Turns out we have 1, 2, 3 capital letters. Okay, so back we go to see what does that determine about skin tone. 3 capital letters, medium brown skin tone, so that becomes our phenotype. And we write that there, right? Okay, and again, that is how skin tone works in humans, although I'm pretty sure it's more than 3 sets of genes. I think it's 4. Okay, so that is how this works. And then you complete this, okay? Complete this page 8. And then you should have a list of traits and their varieties here in the phenotype column. And then you come here and draw a picture of your beautiful baby. Okay, and then you answer the follow-up questions, which should be doable. And that is the whole assignment. Okay. As always, send me an email with questions or come visit our video chat time and bring your questions. Otherwise, hope all is well and talk to you later.